Welcome back to Globe Talks 24, the podcast series brought to you by the Globe family of Royal College. In this series, we delve into insightful conversations with education leaders, educators, innovators, students who aspire, teachers who inspire, and alumni who have achieved from around the world, exploring topics that shape our education landscape and beyond. I'm your host, Kiran Chandraseri. For our second episode, we have with us our special guest for today, Mr. Vimukthi Weeratunga. He is a wildlife biologist, a nature photographer, and a certified diver with over 35 years of experience in nature conservation. Hello, sir.
Thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. So, sir, would you mind telling us a bit about your personal journey so far?
Thank you. Yeah, it all started just after the A-levels, and my father was a civil servant, so he traveled all around Sri Lanka. Every 4 to 5 years, they changed the place. That's a usual thing about the civil service of Sri Lanka. And then whenever he transferred to a new location, new place, we went with him. You know, he has a lot of opportunities to keep us in Colombo, but he took us to all the outstations. So I started my life in Polonnaruwa, and then Kurunegala, and then Hambantota, and then stopped in Karuthura. That's my sort of a school journey. And then throughout that journey, my father wanted us to see the hardship of Sri Lankan life. You know, I mean, it's not like today, you know, in early 60s and mid 70s, life is very hard in the dry zone of Sri Lanka, most remote parts of Sri Lanka. But then what I saw was the real beauty of Sri Lanka, the real wildlife and beautiful, unspoiled nature of Sri Lanka. But nevertheless, I never had any opportunity to learn it, you know, formally learn it, and then pursue on to become a professional who I am today. But then accidentally in 1985, I joined Forest Department as a photographer and a research assistant in 1985. So that was the starting point. I think that's the turning point of my thinking of I had the passion, inside passion, and then joining the Forest Department as a young research assistant, it was a great opportunity for me to explore almost all the forests in Sri Lanka. And at that time, of course, we all know that Sri Lankan situation was not very good. Not all the places are accessible, but the places that is accessible, I started to explore in depth. So every forest patch became an office for me. So that was a great opportunity for me to learn. And that time, fortunately, the Forest Department is one of the biggest conservation agencies in Sri Lanka. And then there are a lot of researchers that are involved with the Forest Department in many type of research. So I have volunteered. I have spent a lot of time in the field trying to learn the real science behind the conservation. So that was the biggest achievement, biggest opportunity that I had at that time. So 12 years in the Forest Department was a great experience. So it's quite a bit of time there. And then I developed the photography as a hobby, also as a profession also. And then 1998, I have shifted my interest towards the wildlife. And then I got a scholarship from Oregon State University in Oregon. And then I went to States to pursue my higher education in wildlife science. So I graduated in 2000 as a wildlife biologist with a major, plus the Earth Information Science Technology, which is the very advanced GIS application on natural resource management. And then it's in Sri Lanka in 2005.
So, sir, you mentioned your passion. What would you say really sparked this passion in you?
It is something that I have explained earlier also, because it's to see the sheer beauty. That is number one. Number two, the dynamics of that beauty. The nature is so dynamic, changes almost constantly. And in that dynamism, that change and the beauty and the learning is the passion. That's still every day that we are learning something, we're trying to explore something, we're trying to answer some questions, because that so much of beauty and secrets are tied in the nature. So as simple as that. Yeah.
I see, sir. So I would like to know, and I'm pretty sure the viewers would like to know as well, how did a childhood passion turn into a career in wildlife biology?
That was really an accident, I would say. Because, when I was young, the wildlife biology or to become a wildlife biologist is not something that we none of us would even imagine at that time, because we all go to the school to become a doctor or engineer or accountant. No, I mean, there are a set of professions that every parent would push your kids to become.
Yes.
But in that sense, when I joined the forest department, I saw, okay, there are professionals who are working in this sector as professionals. So that is where I was thinking to pursue on higher education, and then started to explore the potential professional pathways in wildlife science.
Well, I like to think that everything happens for a reason. So, were there any specific challenges that you had to face while pursuing this path in Sri Lanka?
Obviously, at that time, the wildlife science is not offered any of these universities in Sri Lanka. So, even if I want to become a wildlife person, conservation-oriented professional pathway, there's no opportunities. Number two, the job opportunities also not there. When you go to the other parts of the world, for example, large continents like Africa or South America or North America, there are these specialized opportunities. But in Sri Lanka, we don't have that. And our parents, they're very narrow-minded people. They don't know how to guide us to become this unique type of professions like wildlife science. So that was the biggest challenge. Even today, very few universities offer these very specialized courses in Sri Lanka. That because obviously the universities doesn't have enough resources to offer these very specialized courses. That is where I had to leave Sri Lanka and get that exposure from US.
Oh, I see, sir. So now that we've learned a bit about Mr. Vimukthi Weeratunga and his personal journey, let us move on to today's topic of wildlife conservation. So, my first question is, what do you think are the biggest threats to wildlife in Sri Lanka today?
I think the Sri Lanka is such a small land. We all know that, small island. And then island land area doesn't expand. So that's a fixed land area we have. There are pluses, there are minuses in that context. But the population is increasing. The land area is not increasing, but the population is increasing. And then our needs are also increasing with that. So that is the biggest challenge. That means, how do you manage the land? So the land management is the biggest challenge in wildlife conservation today. Now, we all know that the elephant has become a big problem in this country. That because the very healthy elephant population also living in Sri Lanka with 22 million people.
Yes.
With this small island. So those are the challenges in terms of looking at the land management of Sri Lanka. So we need to pay a lot of attention and also doing it very scientifically. Otherwise, we are going to run into bigger problems in next 5 to 10 years' time.
Yes, of course, sir. So, would you please elaborate on the matter regarding land management, sir?
Yes, now I said that because our population is increasing, our need is increasing. So the land management is a critical issue in conservation in Sri Lanka. So that we need to look at what are the critical areas needs to be conserved. For example, if you're looking at there are different habitats, there are different forest types, there are different wetlands that we need to think of, and then we need to manage that critical habitat. That is actually a part of our own survival also, because if you really destroy those critical habitats, and then we will also be in trouble. Classic example is the floods that we are facing every year.
Yes, sir.
And then floods are, flood management is directly related to the wetland management in Sri Lanka, anywhere in the world, right? If you don't manage the lowland areas, if you don't manage flooding areas, if you don't know manage the riverine habitats, then the flooding will be frequent occurrence. So that directly affects to the human survival. So that is why the conservation and of the natural habitats directly tied to the economy and also to the human survival as well.
Okay, sir. So Sri Lanka has a very high biodiversity. So do you believe that land management would be an easy task to accomplish in a country like this?
No, it's not easy. It's not easy. Why? Because we all are very much human-centric decisions. We are taking the human-centric decision. We are not looking at the other side of the fence. But if you're looking at the holistic picture, which is easier for us to take the decisions, so that we look at all parties, right? Not only the wildlife. Now, if you only looking at our beneficial part, that beneficial for the human race, then that there's a problem. So that is why we need to look at in a very scientific based decision making. That you have to take a decision based on the research, based on the science, based on the data, and based on the facts and figures. Otherwise, things are not going to work. So that is what lacking in Sri Lanka. That is why it is important for us to look at the new science, new practices, technological advancement, everything together so that we can find a solution. It's not easy. It's a bit complicated, but we can find the solutions.
I agree, sir. It's not easy, but we can and we will have to find a solution. So, moving on, do you mind sharing some success stories of conservation efforts you've been involved in?
Well, in Sri Lanka, there are good conservation stories. One is actually protection of largest rainforest in Sri Lanka, which is called Singaraja. I was not involved because I was very small at that time. 1972, the government of Sri Lanka started to allow the Canadian company to clear Singaraja, and then there was a public outcry. That can consider as one of the very successful conservation initiative in Sri Lanka, because it was all the public got together and put a lot of pressure on the government, and subsequent government completely banned the logging project in Singaraja. And then Singaraja is protected today as a World Heritage Site. So that is one of the success conservation stories in Sri Lanka. But then later on, a lot of researchers went to Singaraja and started pursuing on many things. So I was part of that also. So that is part of my learning earlier. And then when later on I joined IUCN, which is called World Conservation Union. In Sri Lanka, we have a country office here in Sri Lanka. In that office, I was the head of biodiversity at that time. So I started a lot of new projects where we have a lot of successes. One such project is starting a project in the east coast of Sri Lanka near Panama, where we started a protection of turtle nests. That project has been going on for 10 years. And that project has yielded a lot of success stories there. And then currently I'm involved in the near Singaraja, restoring a 60-acre small block of land, converting into a forest. And that is showing, I started that project 3 years ago with local conservation agency named Rukrakakanno, Forest Department, and my company, Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. We got together and restoring a 60-acre small plot, trying to create a small oasis so that the native biodiversity that are lost in that area will come back and settle in this small patch of forest. So sharing the science and involving in many research also has been a success of my career for last 30 years.
So, sir, most of our listeners are students. So how can students and young people like us contribute to the preservation of wildlife, even though we aren't scientists?
So that's a good question that you have asked. There are many ways that every citizen can contribute for the conservation, especially the youngsters, because the future is with the youngsters. Our time will disappear very soon, but then youngsters has to come forward and contribute however the way that they can contribute, because it goes long way. You don't have to be a scientist to do it, because there are so much to do and so many things to learn in terms of conservation. The Citizen Scientist Program is one such classic example, where people can look for projects, people can look for initiatives, people can look for small things and then go and contribute for the success of that program. Even for a beach cleanup that you do, you go there and contribute something. That is also something that even a little tiny kid can do it.
Yes.
So all what you need is the motivation and also the will to do it. And then there are so many things to do. And there are so many agencies that are doing a lot of conservation work. And all what you have to do is just to go and look for those opportunities and work with them and learn. And then it will become a passion one day. And that's how anybody can contribute in this field of conservation.
Yes, sir. So speaking of contributing to the environment, we did 2 projects. The first one was Hydrate, where we cleaned up the Mahaveri River alongside the Mahaveri authorities on the 30th of October. And the other project was Wave 24, where we cleaned up the King Ross beach, Vellavatta. So what I would like to know, sir, is how do these projects make an impact on the environment from your point of view?
So that's fantastic. That's the question that you asked earlier also. tied with this initiative. So that is exactly the way that you can contribute towards the conservation as youngsters. Now, for example, if you're cleaning Mahavali, that's the longest river in Sri Lanka, yes, right? Very important for the entire Sri Lanka as a watershed, because it's provides so much of water from the initial stage to Trincomalee. And then by cleaning that river, you are supporting so much of freshwater biodiversity to thrive. Plastic pollution is one of the biggest in Sri Lanka. So cleaning even a small segment of Mahavali River is creating very healthy habitat for freshwater biodiversity, the species that are living in the streams. So that's how you contribute. Even the smaller thing can contribute to a small segment of the river. Second project is beach cleanups. Yeah. So that is also somewhat related to the plastic pollution in Sri Lanka. And not only in Sri Lanka, but other countries also, the plastic pollutions are slowly coming to Sri Lanka, especially from India. And then by cleaning the beach, of course, there are two things. One thing is keeping our beach nice and clean for community to walk around and then stay healthy. Yes. And then we are not letting continuous pollution of the ocean, yes. Especially in the neoshore habitat where the coral reefs and the reef fishes are also, living in that segment of the ocean. So that's how you contribute towards the conservation. That is why every citizen can contribute to small projects like this that has a large impact if you collectively do it.
I agree, sir.